everybody, and welcome. I am Nicole Jackson. I am Senior Climate Justice Fellow with SIEGE at University of Maryland and Environmental Justice Consultant with Monarch Professional Services Group. I am glad that you're here today. We did not expect such a large turnout, but we're happy that you're here. So before we dive into today's topic of food sovereignty, I want to start with like a short icebreaker. So I'm going to put some people in the spot. And I want us all get to thinking about food systems and how we interact with food daily. So the first thing I'd like you to do is just shout out to me what your favorite fruit is. Oh, we got mango. Who else? What else we got? Peaches. Now, see, they knew not to say anything. I'm going to ask you why peaches are your favorite fruit.
Because whenever you eat a really good ripe peach, the juice and it tastes so sweet.
No, but that's good. So what happened, right? You have a memory equated to food. What about you?
Just incredible taste and texture, so sweet. I know it's exotic.
Yeah.
Far away, but
And you said mango. What about you?
The same reasons, but I was also in Jamaica and found out that they eat their mangoes very differently than we do here. So that's an interesting thing.
So again, we have that connection with memory, right? So the next thing I want you to do, I want everybody to close their eyes. Close your eyes, right? So I want you to take a moment, relax, get comfortable, and reflect on your favorite memory of your favorite meal or the favorite fruit that you just said. I want you to think about where it comes from, how it's grown, if it's a meal, how it's prepared, who's prepared it, how it got to your table. And I want you to take just one more moment. Make sure you have that memory locked in. And I want you to open your eyes. I want you to share that memory with the person next to you.
We're three,
Good start.
So that's I was thinking about a soup that I love, and I was thinking about all the seasonings that go in a soup and all the seasonings. Yeah, and all the seasonings are really good. There's a lot of things that go into that you
My first really fun experience with it was Boy Scout.
All right, 30 seconds.
We had to make peach cobbler. Had fresh local peaches. Not only did I was able to make the peach cobbler, I was able to eat
All right. So thank you. Oh, they're really engaged back there. All right. So now that you've shared that memory, I want you to think about your memory and the memories that the people have shared with you. And I want you to hold on to that as we speak with our speakers and go through those presentations. And we want to understand why those memories and connections are so crucial to food sovereignty and helping solving food insecurity. So today we're going to discuss urgent, complex issues about food sovereignty, right? Research on food sovereignty generally paints a not so bright picture. and oftentimes the many low-income and often predominantly Black, African-American, Latino populations, Latino communities, access to food is severely limited. We often sometimes live in, I'll give a perfect example. I live in an area that's not a food desert. People are familiar with food deserts. I live in an area that's a food swamp, right? I chose to live where I live because I like where I live. But I have to go so far to have access to things that are healthy because there's an abundance of things that are unhealthy, like fast food spots. So that's what we typically call a food swamp, right? So when we think about how often these issues are exacerbated and implicated in Black and brown communities, it leads to lots of other issues, like health issues, diabetes. If you ever go into a predominantly Black neighborhood, especially in larger cities, you'll often see next to all these fast food spots, you see dialysis centers. You see clinics for people that may have diabetes and things of that nature. So those are some of the things that we want to scratch the surface with. We want to tackle the food systems that were put in place, and I don't want to, things that were put in place many years ago, similar to redlining, that still exist and cause problems in a lot of our neighborhoods today. So the system is broken. And the broken system oftentimes perpetuates lots of disparities, disproportionately affects oftentimes youth, our seniors, and even young adults, believe it or not. In the neighborhood where I live, there is not a significant, but almost a 0.5% population of seniors. And of those seniors, approximately 18% of those seniors are food insecure. So those are the things that we want to try to tackle. So, however, that only scratches the surface. But I'm here on a panel today with some of our lovely experts here, and they are only going to scratch the surface of what we can achieve and accomplish when we put our heads together. So these ladies bring a diverse experience, knowledge, and they're going to help us navigate the conversation. They represent grassroots initiatives, innovative policies, community-based solutions that often work to promote food sovereignty, equity, and justice. Each of them in their own right has unique stories in overcoming obstacles and creating change, and that's what I'm most excited about. I'm excited to learn from their expertise. Some of these ladies I know from previous experience, and I am blown away. I am often blown away by their stories, and I know I've had like some phone conversations with folks, and it's like, oh, we're going to talk like maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and like, okay. Louisa and I had a conversation. Oh, we're going to just chat a few minutes. It was like over an hour. Talking about food and things that we could do to prepare younger folks for the future, right? So first we have Dr. Alexa White there on the corner. Dr. White is Executive Director of IA Research Institute. She's a leading figure in environmental equity, agroecology, working to promote diversity and environmental justice research, with a focus on sustainable agriculture and global food systems. Dr. White is also an advocate at the United Nations, pushing for stronger biophysical indicators in the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. Her work helps promote the international conversation around food sovereignty. Then we have Eloisa Trinidad. She's the Executive Director of Chile's on Wheels, a nonprofit that provides plant-based meals to communities in need. Eloisa's organization began as a grassroots effort to address food insecurity and has since grown into a national movement. Through her work, she promotes compassionate, plant-forward systems and highlights the intersection of food justice and community empowerment. Joining us on the panel, we have Ms. Paula McGinnis. She serves as the Assistant Director of Council Operations at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. That's a mouthful. Paula is leading the museum's garden initiative, which explores African American agriculture practices and foodways through interactive programs. Her work ensures that the legacy of Black farmers and food sovereignty remains central to understanding of history and culture. And lastly, we have Ms. Bonita Adib, who is the president and founder of Steam Forward and Ujamaa Farms. Bonita's organization connects diverse farmers and seed growers through cooperative economics, helping to diversify over 15 billion in U.S. seed industry. Yes. And Ujamaa Farms represents principles of self-sufficiency, aiming to empower local communities through sustainable farming practices, seed production, and Bonita and Paula together will conclude a portion of, they'll start our panel with a joint presentation showcasing their work that intersects the critical juncture of history, culture, and local food sovereignty. So I will turn it over to Ms. Carla.
So,
Did I start too soon?
well, if you could go back a couple.
Yeah, I can start. I don't think I started a little bit.
Yeah, okay. So our presentation, we'll try to keep it within the timeline. Today is Black History's Green Futures, where we're looking at how we reclaim the old to develop the new. And so we start here with an image of African American people hoeing rice in South Carolina, because we know that Black people arrived to this country, they were specifically targeted to come and be enslaved because of their knowledge, because they were exemplary agriculturalists and had agrarian skills that were then exploited here in the quote-unquote new world. So Black people have always been seed keepers. They've been seed farmers. And so that is what we are reclaiming and part of the story that we are uplifting at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And I'm excited about the collaboration that we have with Ujamaa in telling that story. So the next slide is images of two of our guiding ancestors, and I'll let Bonita talk a little bit about Wangari Maathai and George Washington Carver.
So you've heard we're standing on the shoulders of our ancestors. That's who they are right there. So if you want to go over here at the Environmental Justice Conference, you probably know that Wangari Maathai was the first environmentalist to win the Nobel Peace Prize. First sub-Saharan African woman. Okay, and of course George Washington Carver was the father of American science, agriculture, and of course he was doing this amazing work on educating about culturally meaningful variety. Now we're going to talk about that as we go on, but one of the problems we have sometimes when we try to get people excited about agriculture is they equate it to slavery. And guess what? We were growing food before there was chattel slavery in the United States.
Yeah.
As Carla mentioned, that's why we were recruited to come here because of our tremendous agricultural skills and our knowledge. So when we fled the South, in many ways, we thought we were running away from the past, running away from the farm and forced labor on the farm. Somehow we forgot to bring our slaves with us. And so here we are, without the knowledge that was our heritage, and without the crops, the stuff that was grown. So we're going to try to give you and the community a reason to want to do this work.
So on the next slide, we have some of those crops.
So if you really ask this question, we can probably go back to slide. Can you go back to slide?
Sorry.
Let me just ask the crowd. Can any of you name any African crops? Do you know any?
Yeah, originally.
Yes. Okay. Yam. Somebody said yam. Which yam? I don't know, I just know yams. Okay, anybody else?
We also have like taro, but I know the indigenous name in my country, it's like onduma, but it's almost just like taro.
Yeah, it's, yeah, I'm gonna give you, it's purple. Yeah, okay, let's go on. So, we'll go back to that slide we're on. So what we found out was that this knowledge was basically lost. And some of it was purposely lost, okay? So what we're doing is we're trying to get people to say, no, this is about you and you haven't lost everything. What do you eat on New Year's? What do you have to have? And some of y'all know that if y'all try to get to New Year's dinner without that black-eyed peas on the table, you may be run off, you know? I hear that some parents will have a fit. I didn't mention I'm a granny. What we're doing is we're talking about African crops. We're talking about African grains. Anybody name an African grain?
Rice.
Somebody said rice?
I said rice.
Go ahead.
Sorghum.
Go ahead, girl. All right, that's right. So we are bringing this to the people, okay? And I think one of the most interesting stories up there, likewise, all of these have individual stories. And if you go to the drama Seeds, you can see we write the stories of all these grades. But the one that's really so interesting is watermelon. Why is watermelon so interesting? Because you know it was one of the crops that was vilified because black farmers were making so much money on it after slavery and after the period of Jim Crow that it was vilified so that people in the North would need it. There were major markets for black farmers in the North. Crops were brought up and still are. I met a farmer just last month who was bringing a watermelon from South Carolina and selling it in Boston, New York, and Philadelphia. This is our heritage that was wickedly stolen, and we're reclaiming it. Next slide. So this is, just a little bit about our collective. You can look and see Ghana Cooperative Farming Alliance. We were formed during COVID to try to get the old folks to teach the young folks how to farm, because we realized if you want to eat, it's probably up to you. And who better than you to decide what's right, what you should be eating, what your family should be eating. But it meant having to reclaim that knowledge. And so that's why we have to work with the elders. So our organization always has old folks and young folks talking. We have an oral history project that you can learn more about. I think I'll go on past that. You can learn more about the work we're doing on New Drama Farms. You can learn more about our oral history work. How do we know what's culturally meaningful, what we grow? We ask the elders. They are our encyclopedia. All right, go ahead to the next slide.
Oh, yes. So part of what we're doing is thinking about those green futures and climate mitigation and biodiversity. So we're thinking about tree planting and agroforestry and developing new crops that are adaptable in these changing climates. And reclaiming those old varieties that were lost, like you said. And so here we have an image from the museum's collection that I think makes us think about like the future of what urban agriculture could look like. And so part of the work that Ujama is doing in that development of urban agriculture is the College for Kids. And so that's on the next slide.
So what we found out was that people who had never gardened before, even senior citizens like me, they didn't garden, their parents didn't garden. They remember the stories from their grandparents. How many of you gardened with your grandparents? Anybody in here? Your parents? Oh, some of you, okay. That's really interesting. In many cases, it was like 2 generations back, so how do you get that information back? And so in our work around collard, and you can learn more about our heirloom collard project, we realized that if anybody was going to grow something, the thing they would agree to grow that they wanted to grow were collards. So we realized there were 120 varieties of collards that had just about gone extinct. I mean, only the people who were keeping them were passing away. And we needed to save these collards. And so from that process, we began this work, and you can reach the heirloomcollardproject.org to see the work we're doing restoring these varieties that were actually bred by African American people in the United States using European crops, using those technologies. Sort of like jazz, you did the same thing, right? It's African rhythms and European instruments, that's the American. And so we were able to do that. But because there's so much to know about collard, in order to educate people, we kind of developed them, what are the various types of collard? We've got 120 varieties. So we developed this chart, and this kind of started out with the idea that we had elementary, middle, and high school kids who were in agricultural programs. And so we started teaching them how to breed collard through this project called the College for Kids. This project has really grown, and we have kids who are actually producing enough collard, who have started business around collard, who have learned to farm seed, and who are learning how to do all the science. Actually, some of those kids, like the ones in St. Louis at the Jackie Turner Kersey Center, know more about collards than I do, because I was a trainer as a scientist. I'm a social studies teacher who found themselves doing what? But anyway, that's how I got here. But the idea is, we found something that got people excited. So we started out with a journal to teach people about how you can actually have collard poetry, collard songs. Jill Scott has a story called It's Love, but she talks about eating collard greens. And now we've gone all the way down to producing a book. So we got our first children's book that talks about seed farming using collard, just because it's meaning to the community. And so I think that's basically it. But you can go to our website and learn more at the Yellow Collard Project. Oh, and that's it, at Ujama's Farms. Ujama Farms. And Ujama Seeds, you can buy the book. It's been at the 4th to 8th grade level. And if you want to see it, I mean, we can pull it out.
A few other crops that seeds that Ujama's been working to produce more of are these crops for the future. So these we have on the next slide, there is an image of the Nanacoke squash, more pictures of the collard greens that are growing, and the okra.
So let me just hit on this. So I mentioned there were all these varieties of collard, right? We found the same thing with okra. We had over 2,000 varieties of okra. You know, that's so wonderful. Some people feel it's the most important and most nutritious crop ever. This is the Nanacoke squash that the Nanacoke people had basically lost. It had almost become extinct to them. If you'll notice, they're all different, right? And we call that biodiversity. Within those crops, those land-raised crops, are all this genetic material. And that is where we hope to find the crops of the future. There's a gentleman who called me last week from Louisiana, and you know he had that big storm coming. And so because of the frequency of storms, okra is still a very important cash crop in Louisiana, but the storms knocked them over. So we're doing a breeding project with dwarf okra that are better adapted to wind, that can stand to that effect. So we actually created these as what we call the ultra crops. So you plant all these out in the field, and the last man standing is the one that's adapted to your region, your climate, and your needs. Or unless you want to grow for taste. Some people like sweet okra. Some people like okra that's pink or red. See all the different colors. Some people want okra to make paper. You know, you can make paper products. Some people like it dry. Some people want it pickled. However you want your okra, you can breed all of these crops. So that's where we get to that whole idea of breeding new crops using old varieties to create new crops for the future.
So I'm told we've already been talking more than 10 minutes, so we'll flip through, if we can go to the, we can flip a little bit more to the end. That's an image of our heritage garden that we're growing on the landscape of the museum, where we're growing some of these heritage crops. But you can go all the way to the end. I'll let you wrap up, but I did want to share the contact information and website and everything there for a second.
And our work with the museum is to talk about the power of the revolutionary act of growing your own food, and how it was used by our ancestors as a tool to stand up and fight for themselves and their families. You know, who cares more about you than your mama, okay? That's who the job it is, but we want to put these opportunities back in the hands of our communities that are struggling, so that they can take care of their own children.
So I have some handouts that you can get at the end that have a QR code that to our website, the museum, where you can learn more about some of the things we're growing on the grounds. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I love the collaboration between the museum and the farm, like, you know, the giant and the little train that could, right? So I want to ask Dr. White and Eloisa, how important do you think collaboration with other organizations, local governments, and other stakeholders is in achieving goals? And can you provide some, partnership examples that either of you have had? So let's start with Eloisa.
Yeah, I think that we are rooted in collaboration. There's no way towards liberation without collaborating with one another and creating community and building community. So, as a vegan organization, I should say that we take a multi-species justice approach to food sovereignty, land sovereignty, and food justice. And what that means is that we include all beings in our definition of what justice and liberation looks like, and really fighting towards centering traditional agroecological and indigenous knowledge. I'm Afro-Indigenous myself, and I am rooted in those values, which is how I came to that multi-species approach. And so not only a collaboration with organizations and individuals, but individuals of all kinds, and really being informed by all the relatives that exist here on this planet. And so that's the type of collaboration that we see. As far as organizational collaborations, we collaborate in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. to bring back those traditional practices and all that knowledge that are stored within seeds. So in Colombia, we recently project with Afro-descendant communities as well as indigenous communities that are living together within this, Afro-Indigenous village. That was being lost, the knowledge that was being lost as mestizos were moving in and buying this land that was oceanfront land, which everybody wants. And so that was a really powerful collaboration because we were able with them to set up a center where the elders are now teaching the youth that those agroecological practices that have been lost through the influence of these newcomers coming in. We also collaborate with organizations that are taking a collective liberation approach within the work. And yeah, I don't think that we would have gotten as far as we have. We're coalition builders. A lot of our coalitions are centered around not just the access to food, but the access to land, as well as the access to the knowledge. Our work is about, I would say, mixed between providing direct food relief because people have to eat immediately and they should have access to healthy food, and the other work is rooted in policy. So a large percentage of our work is in policy, and without those collaborations, taking down this very horrific colonial system won't be possible. And so we've recently had a lot of really great wins, especially around school food and flexibility around traditional indigenous crops, and also just legumes, for children, and for that to classify as protein, right? Because they are full of protein. And yeah, I don't think that we could have gotten as far as we have. We're about 10 years old, and the work that we do, especially since we are moving forward this plant-based, plant-forward food system that centers indigenous knowledge without collaboration from all of our relatives, not just human relatives, but all of them.
Thank you. What about you, Dr. White?
That was cute. Yeah, I think that I should first lead with my identity. That's kind of my MO. So I come from a family of sharecroppers from South Carolina and Texas. My grandparents were very critical in raising me, and I didn't really realize that that could be a part of my academic experience until I got to grad school. When I first began grad school, I actually was studying lizards and deserts, and I thought that was fun. I wanted to be a crocodile hunter. But I realized that I would go to parties and no one would understand what I was talking about, so then I stopped doing that. I was in an agroecology lab, and I started to think back when I would go home for my Christmas breaks about my grandparents' conversations and how they raised me to kind of like raise crops and connect to the land, and how separate that was from my academic experience. It was very sterile, and there was no connection to your identity. It was purely just kind of quantitative values. And I saw an error in that. I thought of the academic space as kind of an ivory tower that's trying to preserve that distance between those two things, and I changed changed my entire dissertation to be dedicated to merging those worlds. So I think that that is really critical to embrace the collaborative energy that comes with academics, that comes with politics, because the systems are made so that they are remaining in silos. I did my research in a very qualitative way, which just means going and talking to farmers in Hawaii and Jamaica and understanding their history, understanding their land, why they had it, where they got it from. And I think that through that research, it kind of led me and my best friend to create the Aya Research Institute. So the Aya Research Institute, its mission is to basically allow for scientists and engineers to be engaging in community in a very ethical way. Oftentimes in academia, it's very extractive. They'll come into communities and either tell them what to do, or they will, come in and kind of promise these kind of gifts that they'll give, and then they don't deliver. Outside of that, at Aya, we also have a lot of impact on policy, specifically federal policy. Justice 40 is giving 40% of the federal agencies and resources to environmental justice work. And through that, I've also realized that a lot of the conversations that I have with even federal government agencies are also very siloed, even within the government. And so I think that in order for any movement to be successful within food sovereignty, you have to first understand that you are kind of breaking a barrier that has been created, and that it's really important for you to lead with your identity in order to kind of connect with people on a more relational level and get them outside of the headspace of their job title. I found, I think that through that method for me, it's worked, and I just wanted to communicate that to you. Collaboration is really key to everything, and I don't think that there's a lot of value that's also put into the knowledge of farmers. Oftentimes when I was given critiques to my dissertation, critiques to the work that we do at Aya, it's often kind of like, why would we want to listen to a farmer? And it's kind of just like, well, they're growing your food, right? Yeah, so like, why would you not want to? And so there's a lot of ageism in those conversations, there's a lot of racism in those conversations, there's a lot of global north versus global south, the differences in those conversations. And my main point is just, I think that leading with my identity has been the best way forward to have those collaborative experiences, and always to assume that collaboration is not a part of their methods when dealing with government and academics.
If I may just add something really quickly, because you're talking about identity, and it just, resonated with me, because, coming from a family who kept these, Afro-descendant and indigenous traditions alive through the power of food and growing our own food, I think something that gets lost a lot in the conversation when we talk about Afro-descendants is the indigeneity of African people. And so for all the folks that are here in the room, as a person who is mixed both of Arawakan descendant and Afro-descendant, I think that, reclaiming that, indigeneity is really important, which you are doing through your work and the knowledge stored in these seeds. But through this, term that we've had to sort of come up with in order to achieve political power, it erases a lot of that, right? Like, what is blackness, right? And all of our ancestors who came from all these different nations and tribes who were indigenous people displaced from their land, right? So, I always like to say I'm indigenous on both sides, right? Whether those were my Native ancestors from Abiyala, my Arawakan ancestors, or my African ancestors, and so that is the knowledge that is carried, whether your ancestors, became sharecroppers or were enslaved, and why they were brought here. And so I think that is extremely important to highlight the indigeneity here from this side of the world, which I have put in my DNA, but the indigeneity of my African ancestors that was so removed and in many cases banned, and they were not able to practice their indigenous way. So I just wanted to raise that on indigeneity and African people.
No, thank you. So let's take a pause for a second, because we heard a lot, right? We heard how collaboration is important. We heard how policies that affect us are important. We heard connecting to our own identities, right? We heard connecting to our own identities through the earth that we touch, right? But the overarching thing that I heard from everyone here on the panel is more about inclusivity. So reaching back to bring forward the things that were lost and now once found again, we're able to share that with everyone, right? So I want to work backwards from the panel right now, and I want to ask, start with Dr. White this time. How can we ensure that policy frameworks around food sovereignty are more inclusive of the needs and the rights of frontline communities affected by climate change and environmental degradation?
Including them in the conversation. It's so simple. And it's always so, it's always made to be so hard. And so I spend my time a lot in international spaces at the Conference of Parties, where they do a lot of negotiations about what to do with food. Specifically, my dissertation was about the goal to end hunger. And oftentimes, you'll be in these rooms and they just don't, there are no farmers in the room. There's no one that actually farms anything in the room. And the person that created the document that gives them kind of like warrant and reason to argue in a weird way has never farmed. They just are a statistician from like the FAO or something. And I think that in order for us to move forward, you have to validate the voices and validate them as knowledge resources. Same thing with Afrocentric knowledge and any other kind of ism you think of. If they're not in the room, if they don't have a voice and they're not kind of in these written documents as a formal practice, it won't happen. It just won't. That's my short, sweet answer.
I'll take that a step further and say that besides being in the room is actually implementing the knowledge that is shared. I think oftentimes when I'm in those spaces working like on UN policy and it's always a footnote and it's like, oh, well, we've included this or this is, these folks, and even within the space of centering traditional indigenous knowledge and peasant knowledge, we find a lot of discrimination. Like I was talking recently to some African youth, indigenous African youth, and they were saying how within this food system space and within the UN space, they were being pushed aside because a lot of times these are very white-led spaces, and the white folks want somebody who looks like they just came from the Amazon and who's in full regalia. And so they're in the room, they're speaking, and they're not being listened to because they're pushed aside as, non-indigenous because, racially they're black, right, within the context of that construct. And so I think that to your point, what is inclusivity? What does it look like to be inclusive, I personally don't want to be at that table, even though we're at the table. I want to like burn it all down and like build our own table and have our dinner, because I think the system is just so damaged. And I think that within, international policy, there is just this continuous push to, can we make this bigger? Can it be expanded? Can it be replicated? When we really should be looking at local solutions to all of these issues, because the communities know what they need, they know what they want, and they already have the solutions, right? And I think that's something that's missing always from the conversation, because we don't center those farmers, because we don't center the folks growing our food, because we don't center women who are growing most of our food across the world. And so all of these disparities, it goes beyond just, you have to be at this table, at this meeting, right? It's like, what are these structural issues that are keeping people who, a lot of times, the people that we work with that are growing our food do not have access to food. We have community fridges, we do all sorts of direct food relief, and we see people who are delivering food, who are packing food, who are growing food, not having access to food. And so, beyond inclusivity, how do we address those structural issues?
I would add just that those groups also already have the solutions to the problems
Of course,
most of the time.
yeah. Well,
It's just like we create, they have created these problems because it's commodifiable,
Yes.
and like there's ways to kind of like build a new
Yeah.
solution to a new problem, and it's all in history. It's all there. There's no need to.
We have It's just in our DNA.
What about you, Ms. Anita? From the farmer
From
standpoint?
the farmer
Yes,
point of
from the
view,
farmer
okay, so let me
standpoint.
go hang out with y'all either, okay? So we're gonna let academic, let y'all go and do your thing because we're busy. We're busy trying to get some plants and some seeds in the ground, and y'all trying to talk and want to be in a room with air conditioning, and we want to be outside in the bright sunshine. So, and maybe we're tired of the frustration of all the years of trying to tell y'all, and y'all ignoring us. I was recently working on a particular island that I won't name, and the university called me and said, well, Miss Adee, we want y'all to help us start a seed collection for our island. They passed a bill so we can do that. But where do we get started? They didn't give us. We needed several $1 million. It's like, well, how do you need several $1 million on your island when I happen to know of at least 20 folks in your neighborhood on your island who knows where neem, baobab, moringa has naturalized itself on your island. They're the ones, maybe they don't have all their teeth, but they're the ones with the knowledge you need. So for me, it's dental surgery to have to stop what I'm doing and go do policy work. And we recently received a grant from Union of Concerned Scientists, and those are the nicest people in the world. And it is so hard to get to their meetings when I would much rather give y'all all some seeds and try to get you going. I want every one of you to plant something and to have to take from where my heart is. These are my ancestors. I love them. They are good to me. They allow me to be generous and not be poor. Because with them, with this little pack of seed, I can produce more tomatoes than all of y'all can put together. I would rather touch the land. But unfortunately, I have to be in the room with the academics too. I did find that there were academics who wanted to do something. They called it touching the ground. They wanted to do something. You know what I'm talking about? They wanted to do something real. You know, and people were finding us, including people from this illustrious institution that are finding us to do their graduate studies. And so they are really, really helpful and useful. And you can do both. You can do the academic piece, you can do policy piece, and then you can do the real nitty-gritty ochre piece. But it's not easy.
That's right. You can put your toes in the ground, put your fingers in the ground, dirty your nails, and then we can come in here and look like the queens that we are, right?
And eat some okra.
And eat some
okra.
So again, what I've heard is the theme of inclusivity and collaboration. So how many of you out here, I see all of you in here, right? You're interested, either you're interested in food sovereignty, you know about food sovereignty, or you're in the field and you're a farmer, urban farmer, whatever. So how many of you actually take the time to go work with others outside of your neighborhood collaboratively? I see 1, 2. All right, we have some folks. So now I'm gonna put you on the spot and ask one of these folks to tell us who you collaborate with.
UPAL.
Okay. That's easy. Can you tell everybody what UPAL is?
United People Against Lead. Started by Queen Shabazz. I think her son died from lead poisoning, and so she started that organization. But then also, and thank you for giving me the space because I wanted to plug this in. I'm going through collaboration with America Farmland Trust, Soil Health Advisor. They train you to be a soil health person and to go to farms and teach them how to have healthy soil. After each training, you get $1,000. It's 4 trainings, you get $1,000 for each training. And then once you create a soil health plan, you get another $1,000. So you get $5,000 total for that.
Thank you, Chad, for that. I do want to ask, how many of us in here collaborate with organizations that work with children, youth, or kids? And I ask this question because we can only do so much, right? We're getting older. We're going to need their help. So how many of us in here collaborate with youth organizations? Could you tell us a little bit about the organization you collaborate with?
Yeah, I work with APA
unequal, which is part of TikTok. And we work with a lot of organizations that are looking for unique environmental justice projects. And we have organizations that are based in schools. So they are trying to make school gardens and like involve students in agriculture and environmental justice, so they can learn in early stages of their life how to have all the information they need to be free in what they want to make with the environment.
And I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. Can you tell us why you collaborate with the youth organization?
That's a great question because before working with them, I made microbiology and it was just research. And then I wanted to have other perspective because I like research, but I was noticing that academia, it's very focused on doing research, but they are doing nothing with the results that they are having in the lab. So I wanted to pursue public health, environmental public health, and when I had the opportunity to like really see organizations that were screaming for help in academia, for like reaching out professors to help the community, and academia were doing nothing. That was the moment I realized I wanted to combine all the experiences I had in my personal life and in academic experiences to work with organizations that doesn't have the resources or the scientific knowledge or environmental knowledge to pursue what they want to achieve for their communities. So I think it was like several experiences in my personal life and academic life that makes me go to that field.
Thank you for sharing that. And the reason I ask that is because our why is really what drives us, right? We can have all these things that we're interested in, and we may do it for a while, we'll dabble in it for a while, but if we don't have a why that we're passionate about, it'll often like fall off, right? It'll take a backseat to other things that we're doing. So the why, in terms of why you're interested in food sovereignty, why you're doing the work that you're doing, is very important. And I asked about kids organizations because I'm going to ask our lovely panel here. I'm going to start with Eloisa and then go to Ms. Carla. How can we better ensure that food, nutrition, security for children, youth, and particularly marginalized communities, and what role can local food systems and community-based initiatives play in the gaps that we see?
Yeah, so, youth are and will be the most impacted by the triple planetary crisis, and oftentimes they're very much left out of the conversation, including when it comes to talking about food and nutrition and health. One of the programs that we have at Chili Soul Meals is our Youth Steering Committee in partnership with Friends of the Earth. We work on school food, so that is federal food policy. The students also are tasked with a local project around food systems, so oftentimes that is their own school where they are advocating for healthier plant-forward foods. And so, back to what we were talking about, centering those that are most impacted, and inclusivity is really giving youth and children the voice. When we talk about food insecurity, whether here in the United States or at a global level, children and families with children are the most impacted by hunger. And so those conversations not only need to be had, but they also need to be led. Children, know what they like and what they want, and they, if they are given the opportunity, will grow up to be healthy adults. That relationship that we have to food it's already defined and starts being defined when we're in the womb. And by the time we're 2 years old, our taste buds are already shaped. And if we have a very disrupted type of relationship to food, you'll see that really impact, even as an adult when we are food secure, our relationship to food, which leads to mental health issues, eating disorders, all sorts of things that we do not connect. And so I think it's extremely important when we're talking about children and youth, for them to be part of the conversation and for us to listen. And so that's what we do at the Youth Steering Committee. They lead the way. They're the ones speaking to the EPA. They're the ones speaking to the USDA. And we really let them lead the program. And so we provide the support, we guide them, we make introduce them to folks and the connections, but they have so much to say, and they are already experiencing a lot of climate anxiety, and so this is the world that they're growing up in. And we're seeing this, I'm also an educator, and we're seeing this, in children that are very young, they're 8 years old. Beyond that, we're seeing markers of chronic illnesses in this country with children as young as 10 years old as well, because of the lack of access to healthy food. Within our Youth Steering Committee program, we've had children who have started eating healthier just on their own, researching online what healthy eating is in middle school. Children who have dealt with cancer, with other chronic illnesses. I had one student who was severely sick, and his entire, after middle school, his entire high school career became about having this anxiety around their younger sibling not going through the same thing. And so I think we need to be really connected to what our children and youth are experiencing and really listen to them, because there are beings that are flourishing, and oftentimes they get pushed aside and the adults decide everything, which I don't think should be the case.
I have to point to the work that our sister museum, the Anacostia Community Museum, has done for decades. They recently launched their environmental justice center, the Center for Environmental Justice there, and they've been doing so much work we're the Smithsonian, our mission is to educate, is to diffuse knowledge, and part of what they've been doing is working with young people, elementary, middle school, high school, in the work of touching the ground, in growing gardens on the grounds of their museum, getting to know where their food comes from, what it looks like to grow from a seed to something that they can eat. The museum is also a location where people can come and get food. They have a food pantry there. So it really is focused on hands-on learning for young people and making them, providing a space for them to become more comfortable and, develop those skills that they need to do the work that you're talking about. Then happens at that next level where they can be their own advocates, so yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important. When we talk about advocacy, we think about activism, right? So I want to ask you guys, before we start with audience engagement, what advice would you give to individuals that want to work with kids to help start their own initiatives to help combat food insecurity and promote food justice? Dr. White, let's start with Dr. White.
Yeah, I don't work with kids, but
I know.
But the youth that I do work with, it really resonated with me. What you said, Eloisa, about students that you work with that feel as though they have to present a certain way. We were mentioning Amazonian garb and how typical Black students don't have the ability to speak. I think that navigating those spaces takes a lot of skill and should also have a lot of dedicated time prior to entrance into that. Obviously, there's going to be some sort of motivation behind children and students to connect with land and be sovereign and have all of these kinds of healthy ways of living. But I think that there also needs to be a lot of care and time taken to addressing how they will be perceived, as well as kind of how they are socially going to be essentially beginning a movement. In a lot of these spaces, I've found that the majority of the voices that speak oftentimes are very, very good at public speaking and being eloquent and producing knowledge in a way that is typically seen as revolutionary. But I've often also seen many youth kind of tossed to the wayside just because they're not able to survive the social inequities that they're encountered with. I just think that the mind of the revolutionary needs to be something that's given a lot more focus from the beginning, as opposed to kind of just the pure interest in the subject.
Yeah, and that highlights for me language justice. I think oftentimes, we want a specific type of person or youth or child or whoever to be at the front, right? And we continue to push that narrative. And I think it's really important when we're thinking especially about anyone, right? Regardless of human or not human, child or adult, it's what does language justice look like when you're doing advocacy work? And just to answer your question, I think first and foremost, if we want to work with youth and children, we have to think of ourselves as that, as elders and ancestors, and then we're becoming elders, and how are we healing ourselves first? Because if you're going to go into any space, any advocacy space, children or not, we need to work on our own relationship to food, to the earth, to the soil, to the land, all of those things, and then really understand that all of it is a healing process, because the last thing that you want to do is bring that trauma and pass that trauma down to our children and our youth who are already dealing with so much, especially for Black, Indigenous, and Brown youth. And so that's something that comes to mind for me is how do we heal ourselves, and how do we look at ourselves as becoming elders that are going to pass down and are passing down all of this knowledge. Besides that, I think that tokenization is a problem when people are working with youth, and so there is this tokenizing of specific youth and pushing them forward, and that's something that they oftentimes, within the work that we do, and we have all of these learning circles and healing circles, talk a lot about. And so just being very mindful that there is a difference between tokenizing and centering someone.
Thank you. What about you, Ms. Benita?
Well, it takes me back to the first time we started doing this work, because I was doing STEM work with kids, and they wanted to be doctors, they wanted to be engineers and mathematicians, but let's get basic, science begins, or originally, there was a phrase called kindergarten. The concept was that learning should take place in the garden. I mean, even in Germany, they don't do that anymore. I was devastated to find that out. But the idea is, where should learning begin? The other issue is that there's an underutilized resource in our community. Those strong bodies, those strong backs, those creative thinkers, their ability to read technical documents, internet, to Zoom and get information. How do you do this? They can, in 2 minutes, get directions. They are underutilized resources in our community. So by pairing the entire family, children and youth together, that intergenerational piece, I think it's a way in which we can bring a lot of loneliness. And children are dying of loneliness too. These days we live in where everybody's isolated behind their Game Boys or their machines or whatever those days are. They can be coming together, working together. So I take my lead. Now, I've ran a nonprofit for many years that listen to youth, and we would have the kids tell us what they wanted to do, and then we try to find a program. And our organization was founded on the work of kids who believed that everything they needed to learn about science they could learn through growing. And so I'm so proud. I was saying to somebody that the cover here was designed by one of our youth. And the whole idea of all these different talents that are in our community. And for some reason, we don't seem to be finding that God part, looking for the God part in all of us. All of us bring something to the table. And maybe through the village concept, breaking into smaller and smaller units where you can discover the talents. Because if the group is too big, you have time to find out somebody knows you know, how do you check GPT? Whatever you need us to do. You know, I mean, there's somebody there who knows it. You know, it's amazing that, you know, when you look in a room, you would be very, very excited to know what genius is in that space with you. So I think if we can do asset mining, asset mapping, and better understand our community, we can maybe get more done.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's a great way to segue into our audience engagement. But after I ask you this, in 5 words or less, what would you want our audience to take away from you today that can also be actionable for them? I stumped them, y'all, because that wasn't one of our prepared questions.
Can actually, I can pair it back something I heard to help you out.
That'd be great.
Elevate local solutions. That to me, was a game changer, and I appreciate it, y'all. There you go. So I got a ball rolling.
All right. Well, on that note, if our panelists don't have anything else, before we get to the lovely seeds, because they are great. I got some last year. Y'all gonna know.
I know.
You didn't give us Let's think. So what we'll do, we'll take a couple questions, then we'll come back. How about that? So we have one question here. Yeah, we'll come back.
Is anybody ready? I don't think.
Hi, my name is Kiana. I go
Kiana?
Kiana.
All right.
I go by they, them pronouns. Identity-wise, I'm from South Carolina. I am of Southern Black people, and I am Liberian. So food is very, very important to me. But something growing up and also getting into this work, kind of similar to what you were saying, is I didn't learn a lot of terms when it came to where I live, because I'm from Gaston, South Carolina, where there's like 2 stoplights. We just got a KFC. And which you would call a food swamp there, because there's no Whole Foods up here, or there's no such thing as a mom. Didn't know what Trader Joe's was until I moved up here. And going back to like the connection with kids and the land, I felt like during going through K through 12, I feel like we were mentally forced away from the land because of the history of Black people in South Carolina. And I felt like our social studies teachers were like, slavery is bad, Black people don't touch farming anymore, and that's how that was. And kind of like dealing with that into my adult life and trying to find my reconnection back to the land in terms of food, in terms of food systems, and kind of rewiring my brain to understand that our people grew our own food, we had our own stories to tell, we brought this knowledge here, which is not shared in Southern education. It wasn't shared that Black people had this knowledge to grow this food, to know how to do that. On top of my other half of my side of the family, my Liberian side of the family, where elders had a hard time of preserving culture and passing it on to us due to whatever trauma that was dealt with back home. And so I guess my question is to you, because I don't know if I consider myself an elder yet, and I would say I'm more of like a middle generation. So I guess my question is like, how, because you were talking about we need to heal ourselves before even trying to bring youth into learning how to reconnect with the land. Like, how do you help your elders heal their reconnection back to the land? To also preserve culture, to then teach young folks to connect to the land, connect to what they're putting in their body, to their food, to where it's not a point of you're 22 years old and now you're learning why there's a bunch of fast food places around you. There's no access to healthy, nutritious foods. Because another thing I've noticed while being up here is that the access to farmers markets that there's not an access to back at home. Because most of the time farmers are selling to bigger institutions, they're not selling locally. And again, so that representation of farmer selling locally, you should be eating locally thing is not really shown to youth or shown to anybody over there. So kind of just wanted to know, how do we preserve culture while also deconstructing what's being done in the South? Because as progressive as things kind of have been, I feel like even going back home, there is still a notion of Black people shouldn't touch food. My family very much so is like, why are you studying food? Why do you want to do that? Yeah.
So let's have Miss Bonita answer this one first, if you don't mind.
Well, it makes sense to grow your own foods, and anybody who doesn't think that is dumb. So first of all, you have to be a little bit cocky about this. I do these every day, many times a week. First thing I tell farmers and growers to do is sit up in a chair. Sit up, be proud, hold your head up, hold your shoulders back. You should feel proud of you and your heritage. And those rest of those people should be bowing down to what you do for them. I mean, it's just a mess. It's just all wrong, okay? So it's gonna take a little cockiness. You know, it's like the Black Power movement. Say it loud. You know, that's what it is. It's just another phase of that. Reclaiming your heritage. That's why I talk about African crops. Because whoever you are, you got something worth sharing. Share it. Something that will make me feel better, more nutritious, better life. So I say we just need to find a way to know your audience. Now, I can say certain things to you I couldn't say to some other audiences. But I tell everybody, I don't care who you are, what did your grandma eat? You know, if you believe you are what you eat, you are what your ancestors ate, that's what you should be growing and eating. There's a little bit of cockiness that goes with it, right? A little bit of pride, but that's the energy that gets you over the hump of ignorance. Trust me, you can Google anything. You can too, with Google University. And start where you are, start small. Start in a cup or in a tennis shoe. But there's no excuses. Get started now. If you're in a dorm room and there's this much light, there's quite a few things that will grow in this much light. Get busy, get now. Don't wait, but of course I'm all like, I encourage people to get started because I don't know if I have tomorrow. But y'all may not have tomorrow either. So today's the day, get started, get busy. And don't apologize. I'm sorry, I'm a little bold sometimes.
What about you, Elisa?
So you said a lot, so first I'd like to say that we are always in a state of healing. I don't think we are ever done because and reconnecting, because we've all been very severely interrupted by Western colonization, and I don't think that work is ever done or finished. And then I heard you talk a lot about your grandparents, and I think the power of the story is really important. Oftentimes it's very challenging, right? But it's how we approach, perhaps getting our relatives to share those stories with them. You know, like we were asking, what's your favorite food, your favorite meal, your favorite fruit? What do you remember as a child growing up? And I think how we frame the question can really shift whether or not it is answered. And I think that sharing those stories, and a lot of times those stories will be about trauma. It will be about those challenges that we're faced, and as diasporic people, and we both have very different experiences. I have a very different experience with food than you, and all of those things, right? And understanding the different parts, and also knowing that you have so many other relatives, right, that come from the diaspora, and that perhaps you can reach out to some of us, and we can share our food stories, and begin there, and interacting with other relatives that may not be your immediate relatives as well. So I think that all of that in that story sharing can be a critical part of the reconnecting, and often, and it should often happen first, just so we know our identity, where we come from, and really the healing work that we need to do. But we are all your relatives, so we're all happy to share.
Thank you. So we have I want one question from this side, but can we address it to Ms. Carla or Dr. White?
All right, thank you. I am a native South Carolinian, and I do understand, but it starts with us, right? And I started young, so my question is, and my grandparents and everybody learned from me, and as they got older, they kind of gravitated towards what they saw me do. But now I'm trying to teach young people, and that's my question. As I teach young people, I'm volunteering in these schools, and I wanted to know, how can I connect this passion I have about food health and make it innovative, like talk about how it's important for the environment and resource, energy, and all of that. How does it tie in with energy conservation and leaving that footprint, less carbon footprint? Could you impart that for us? And he said,
Ms. Carla or Dr. White, yes.
Okay, who wants it? Dr.
Essentially, so I can get a good grasp of what you're saying, is how do we blend this within the whole kind of sphere of
Yes.
climate?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so food is often forgotten, I would say, in these spaces.
Yes.
People take it for granted. Whenever food comes up, everyone kind of just assumes that the answer is very simple, and it's often the most complex and requires the most reference from other people that aren't in the room. I think that becoming more integrated in the climate spaces just to kind of bring people back to what they do day to day. You need to eat to live. You have to figure out what we're going to do when it comes to climate change, because it's going to change the way that we eat. And there's no way for us to move forward if we all don't band together in some sort of way to figure out the problems. You can relate it back to anything. So a lot of the work that I do is relating food justice and food sovereignty to energy justice, to differences in different kinds of flooded resources, what that really means for different disasters that are happening. And food is affected by all of it. If the land floods, we don't have any food. If there's no energy, there's no way that we can really produce the food and get it across the nation. I can go on and on about why it matters, but basically being very kind of proud to express how important food is across all of these pieces is really critical. And no matter which piece you take, food is always related. I can also talk to you after this, because that was a very glossary answer, but yeah.
It still was good.
There's a session tomorrow on factory farming, otherwise known as CAFOs, that I believe will dive deeper into all of this, that we didn't get a chance to do today, but all of you should attend that session, because it is so connected.
And with that, I'm going to say thank you. And in addition to the CAFOS session, they're going to talk about chicken farming, actually. I also invite you to come back here. We're going to have a part 2 of food sovereignty tomorrow, food sovereignty in the Mid-Atlantic, where we will have panelists from DC, Delaware, and Pennsylvania. So I invite you to come back here, and I'm going to say thank you to our panelists. And before we are kicked out of the room, come up, talk to our panelists, exchange contact information, grab your seat, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for helping with that.